Hi folks, thanks for coming back to the channel, and we're going to be talking again about this vexing and emotive issue that I call the missing few. There's an introductory video on the channel which explains the background to all of this. How can it be that there have been RAF aircrew and Luftwaffe aircrew from the Battle of Britain and beyond that crashed in the UK, reported missing, not recovered at the time, but recovered since by aviation archaeology enthusiasts and indeed the authorities on occasion. So it's difficult really for people to understand how that somewhat sad and unfortunate circumstance has arisen. And it's all explained in the introductory video, and then we've gone through a chronology with 3 other videos of the recoveries that have taken place and the evolving antipathy between the enthusiasts and the Ministry of Defence, the stance of which is to let the sleeping dogs lie, not to be proactive about recovering these airmen for a decent burial, arguing that they're recorded on the Runnymede Memorial to the Missing and that that's good enough, which is contrary to what many families want to happen, and it's a real mess, quite honestly, back in the 70s and the 80s, a long time ago now, and it's been ongoing since about 1971. So it's all explained, and now we are coming up to 1986, which is a massively significant date. Now, hitherto, the Ministry of Defence issued notes for guidance to recovery groups and had certain regulations. You have to apply for a licence to be able to recover a crashed aircraft. You then have to report on what's discovered so that the items can be transferred, the ownership's transferred from the Crown to the individual or the recovery group, and so on and so forth. And it wasn't policy to issue licences where a pilot was missing, which is understandable really, except to say that there is nothing being done by the authorities to recover these people or act upon solid information that's being contributed and shared by the enthusiasts and the enthusiast groups. So there's a lot of bad feeling running about this, and the MOD have been increasingly embarrassed by licences being issued after fatality and the pilot's buried, only for the excavation to reveal that the majority of the remains, human remains, still remain at the site, and all kinds of things. And it really has become quite a battleground, really, between Whitehall and those dedicated to bringing these incredibly brave airmen out from the cold. So what's happening now it's very interesting, because the MOD recovery guidelines, they are just that. There's no weight of law attached to them, and the only sanction possible is that the MOD is hardly likely to cooperate with you in the event of you contravening these regulations. So there wasn't much incentive for people to actually toe the line. However, Michael Mates MP, who was a former army officer, he actually became wrapped up with protecting military remains and put through the House of Commons and ultimately the Lords the Protection of Military Remains Act. Now, the idea of this was to introduce a system whereby certain sites are prohibited places. So things like, for example, I'm a scuba diver. I've done a lot of wreck diving in the past, and I've written books about HMS Royal Oak that was torpedoed at anchor at Scapa Flow by U-47 only a few weeks into the Second World War, with a huge loss of life. It's only lying in 20 odd metres of water, which is not a deep dive, but you're not allowed to dive it because it's a war grave. And that's kind of fair enough in a way, but on the other hand, what's the difference between that and maybe walking across a battlefield where thousands of people have been killed? You can walk across a battlefield, so why can't you dive and have a look at HMS Royal Oak. I don't see anything disrespectful in that, but that's just a personal view. The fact of the matter is, it is a prohibited site, and so too are the aircraft crash sites where human remains are known or believed to be present. So this Protection of Military Remains Act is going to change everything because it has the weight of law behind it with criminal convictions and punishments. And with the next episode, I'm going to look in detail at the Protection of Military Remains Act and what it's all about, because I'm sure a lot of people don't know. Now, I researched all this. I mean, I've been involved in aviation archaeology myself for 40 years more, but I felt the need back in 1998 to really document what had been going on and explain the Protection of Military Remains Act and all of the chronology of the different recoveries and all the rest of it. So I did that in Missing in Action, Resting in Peace in 1998. This is not a sales plug because this book's long sold out, so they're only available on the second-hand market. But it did perfectly, I think, in detail, by interviewing enthusiasts who were present and so on and so forth, provide this chronology of events that led up to the Protection of Military Remains Act. Now, all of this I've revisited recently in Battle of Britain Remembered, which is volume 8 of the 1 million word, 8 volume official history I've recently completed for the Battle of Britain Memorial Trust and National Memorial for the Few. The first 3 volumes are available. Volume 4, Airfields Under Attack, is out next month, and I think that the other 4 will be released in 3-month intervals, so it won't be long before that's out, and that sort of brings everybody up to date from between 1998 to today. But today I specifically want to talk about the 2 recoveries that were really leading up now to the Protection of Military Remains Act. And the Protection of Military Remains Act really is going to change everything. So my old friend Andy Saunders was heavily involved in all this for years, obviously, and on September the 1st, 1986, which is only 9 days before the Protection of Military Remains Act becomes law of the land, Andy oversees and leads a team to recover the remains of Pilot Officer Charles Barber from 140 Photographic Reconnaissance Squadron, whose Spitfire crashed on the 24th of April 1942 near Winchelsea. And it's a right convoluted saga about why he's still missing. And there was lots of arguments going on between the family and the authorities. The family believed there was insufficient done at the time to excavate the site and recover any human remains. And it was all going on. But there was a lot of bad feeling. And in 1953, when the Runnymede Memorial to the Missing was unveiled, the Barber family refused to attend and held their own service near the crash site, or at the crash site, I expect, at Udimore near Winchelsea. So, you know, again, this is another family that feels slighted and feels that they're not being listened to, not being acted to, that their loved one is not being brought in from the cold. So, with the impending Protection of Military Remains Act, Andy and team went ahead and did just that. So the recovery takes place on the 1st of September 1986, and lo and behold, Pilot Officer Barber's recovered. So the remains are, given to the police, and the coroner's process is observed, and basically it was put to the MOD that they should issue a licence because the family was on side, and the MOD, although it assured that no licences were unreasonably refused, took 3 months, delayed, and then the licence had still not been issued or even a decision reached by the 28th of August 1986, hence why the team decided to go ahead. And I don't think personally that's unreasonable, given the fact that the family are well on side and the MOD have delayed this, clearly, I would suggest deliberately, knowing that the PMA, Protection of Military Remains Act, is about to come in. So again, this is a vexing issue and an emotive one, and tempers are running high. So, as I say, the recovery takes place, and Pilot Officer Barber is recovered. Now, he's not a Battle of Britain casualty, but I've included Barber in this because of the importance of that recovery being in the immediate run-up to the Protection of Military Remains Act. I call it the PMA, other people call it POMRA, Protection of Military Remains Act. I prefer PMA, but anyway, tomato, isn't it, really? So, yeah, so Barber is buried appropriately in the churchyard at St Oswald's, near the family's home in Yorkshire. Raymond Barber, the brother, the pilot's brother, has the last word in this part of the book, where he says, "To me, I can never think how Bertie," which was Charles Barber's nickname, might be today. To me, he'll forever be just 22. So, there's no closure for this, is there, when people are missing? My own great-grandfather's missing from the First World War, and I remember vividly a photograph of him in my great-grandmother's house when I was probably younger than 5 years old, and asking who it was and being told it was my great-grandfather. I said, "Well, where is he?" "Well, he's missing." "Well, what do you mean he's missing? What happened to him?" "Well, he was killed in the war." "Well, what happened?" "Well, we don't know." And to me, as a child, as an infant, that just didn't satisfy me. So my interest in the missing has been a lifetime, really. And time again, you read these crushingly emotive and emotional statements from families who are denied closure. I think it's just terrible. Anyway, that's Barber. So the next thing we've got is 4 days later, September the 5th, 1986. So that's just 4 days after Barber and 4 days before the Protection of Military Remains Act becomes binding law of the land. There's another recovery. So this time it's a German, a Battle of Britain casualty, Leutnant Helmut Strobl, a 5 Staffel JG-27, MU-109 pilot who shot down on his 25th birthday, 5th of September 1940, by Sergeant Charles Hurry, a Hurricane pilot of 43 Squadron at Tangmere, and crashes near Appledore in Kent. And in Hurry's recollection, in his combat report, and when he later recalled that combat, he said it was a hornet's nest of 109s, but we were going pretty fast in the dive. Perhaps they didn't see me against the ground. The Singleton 109 was flying straight and level when I caught up with him over Appledore, and I gave him a short burst from 200 yards. He immediately burst into flame and dived into the ground. The pilot did not bail out. Now, that site was actually investigated by the Ashford and Tenterton Recovery Group, which later became the Brenzett Aviation Museum, in 1971. And some highly prized items were recovered, including a lot of cockpit items, the Revy reflector gun sight, the pilot's parachute harness, release buckle, and iron cross. And also the excavation confirmed that this was Werke number 3627, which was Strobl's Messerschmitt 109 E1. Now, it was also excavated again in 1978 when further identification plates and the aircraft's oxygen apparatus was recovered, but no human remains were reported. Now, you could argue that being so, it's because none were found. However, I must admit, I do find that hard to believe. Perhaps it's the policeman in me, the detective in me, which is what I used to be in a previous life, that if you found parachute items, considering the parachute strapped to the pilot and he sits on it, I find it difficult to accept that no human remains were found. Anyway, moving on the 46th anniversary of the crash, 5th of September, a third excavation took place, and Strobl's human remains were recovered together with the all-conclusive identity discs. As I've written in the book, the disturbing fact, however, is that Helmut Strobl's remains were discovered wait for it, in a plastic carrier bag. I have no words. So, I really have no words. Really. Does anybody who has words, please put them in the comment section below, because I'm lost for them, and that doesn't happen to me very often. So the evidence and the inquest conclusively identified Helmut Strobl, and some years later the pilot's sister wrote to Sergeant Charles Hurry, the man who shot her brother down. And Charles Hurry said, "The letter caused me to do some heart searching. It was a courteous letter, and I responded accordingly. I was glad that she didn't ask how her brother died. I was shot down, in fact, 13 days later, and I would not wish that experience on anybody." But at least Charles Hurry survived. Many didn't. So that was the last recovery, Strobl, who was taken back to Germany, actually, to Kolbnitz, near Baggerstein in Germany, and buried in the family plot, and not at Cannock Chase, at the big German war cemetery where most of the others recovered have been buried. So it's a strange situation, isn't it, all this? And we've now got to the last recovery before the Protection of Military Remains Act comes in. So if you watch all of the videos, I think it must be 5 now, you've got the whole story up to this point. So in the next video, I'm going to talk about the Protection of Military Remains Act. What is it? What does it consist of? What does it want us to do? What are the penalties? And going forward, I'm going to talk about the recoveries after the Protection of Military Remains Act, because it still didn't stop the problem completely from the Ministry of Defence's perspective. And there were a couple of controversial issues which we'll speak about. And then, when I conclude this little series, I've got 2 special guests coming into the studio to join me to give 2 probably quite opposing views, I would think. We've heard a lot about the Ministry of Defence in this series, so I think it's only right that the Ministry of Defence have an opportunity to put their side across in person. And I'm pleased to say that retired Group Captain Clive Montelier, who is head of the casualty section at RAF Innsworth, not far from me in Gloucester, the MOD communications team have approved a request for Clive to come into the studio and talk about this whole business from the MOD's perspective. Now, you can't hold people like Clive responsible for things that have gone on in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s and the 2000s, because Clive's not been in the post that long. But I think it's interesting to hear from the horse's mouth the MOD's actual stance on all of this today. We know what the stance is in the past because it's all in the book and it's documented. So I'm really looking forward to talking to Clive. I'm sure everybody will find that fascinating. And then I think we'll have my equally good friend Steve Vizard in, who has been involved in this since Pontius was a missing pilot, probably. And I'm looking forward to talking to Steve. So we'll have both views. And I'd like to think that I'm a level-headed individual, maybe in the middle. And as a former detective, I was always taught, as indeed I write my history, that you cover all points of view, all angles, all aspects, and you present the evidence to the court, as it were. And the way that I write, my court are my readers. So the evidence is all there in the books. You don't argue to a preconceived idea or theory. The evidence drives the narrative, and it's just the same with this. So it's going to be really interesting to continue this chronology and then hear from 2 very experienced practitioners in the area of compassionate casualty clearing and aviation archaeology. So looking forward to that. So please can look at the other videos if you haven't seen them already, so you're up to speed. We're going to try and release these videos every week. It will take a bit of time to get Steve and Clive into the studio, but we'll work on that later this summer. and we've got quite a lot of stuff in the bank already. We've got a lot of podcasts I did with Andy Long about the Defiant aircraft. I've got the memoirs of Spitfire pilot Jack Stokoe, 603 Squadron, as a podcast, and a video about the Battle of Britain over time in cinema. So we've got quite a lot in the bank while I get on filming these. But thanks for watching. I hope you found it interesting. You're probably as shocked as me about a certain aspect of this video, upon which I won't dwell any further. But please subscribe to the channel. You can watch for free and join the community, join the discussion. Comments below, any ideas for future Battle of Britain related topics, videos, podcasts, any comments you have, please leave them. I love to engage with our viewers, and I'll always reply to everybody. So thanks again, and I'll look forward to speaking to you next time. Cheers.